Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read a part of Sir Richard Burton's book, First Steps in East Africa, Exploration of Harar. And in this part, he is telling us about the port of Berbera and gives us a little bit of its history, and also describes how it was what he calls the Great Emporium of East Africa, which basically means like it was the great commercial capital, we can say, of East Africa. A lot of trade used to happen at the port, and seems like it handled a lot of trade, maybe even more than the other cities that were along the coast of East Africa. But in this video, I'm going to focus on the trade fair that happened annually, which I found to be very interesting. And in this trade fair, people from a large part of the Horn of Africa used to travel to Berbera. And also people used to come from Iraq, people used to come from India, people used to come from Yemen, people used to come from Turkey, people used to come from very many places to come to the trade fair to bring goods and also to buy stuff, and I found that to be very interesting. And this is what Sir Richard Burton writes about the annual trade fair. Lieutenant Grotteden of the IN, writing in 1848, I don't know who this person is, seems like he's somebody who wrote about the trade fair, and Richard Burton was relying on his writings. He says, thus describes the place: the annual fair is one of the most interesting sights on the coast, if only from the fact of many different and distant tribes being drawn together for a short time, to be again scattered in all directions. So the trade fair would happen, and people from all over the place, different groups of people, will come to the port of Berbera, or that site. And that, to this person, this is not Richard Burton is quoting him, seems like it was something that was not ordinary. He continues to say, before the towers of Berbera were built, the place from April to early part of October was utterly deserted, not even a fisherman being found there. But no sooner did the season change than the inland tribes commenced moving towards the coast and preparing their huts for the expected visitors. So this writer is talking about the days before permanent settlement had happened on the land. And it turns out that between April and October, there was nobody on that site. It was basically vacant. But then beginning November, then it started filling up. And of course, we can speculate as to why from the months of November that you would have a business going on in that part of the Horn of Africa. I think the monsoon winds had something to do with it, because we are talking of the time when travelers at the sea depended so much on how the winds were moving, and the winds will change directions based on the season of the year. So I think that did inform to a large extent this trade fair happening beginning November. So the native communities will move to that site, and they will start preparing. They will start building houses that will be used by the people who are coming to the trade fair. A small craft from the ports of Yemen, anxious to have an opportunity of purchasing before vessels from the Gulf could arrive, hastened across, followed about a fortnight to 3 weeks later by their larger brethren from Muscat, Sur, and Ras El Khaimah, and the valuably freighted bagalas from Bahrain, Bussorah, and Grain. So there were those who will come early. For example, people from Aden, maybe we can say merchants from Aden will come early than the rest of the people, and then others will follow later on. Lastly, the fat and wealthy Banyan traders from Borobunder, Mandevia, and Bombay rolled across in their clumsy courtiers, and with a formidable row of empty ghee jars slung over the quarters of their vessels, elbowed themselves into the permanent position in front tier of craft in the harbor, and by their superior capital, cunning, and influence soon distanced all competitors. So later on, he calls them the Banyan, and these are Indian merchants and traders who will arrive, and they used to come maybe after everybody else had arrived. But they had a lot more capital than everybody else, and that seems is what he's saying here, that they had more money they had a lot more, we can say, economic influence, the trade fair. And when they came, the rest of the people will have difficulty competing. Then he continues to say, during the height of the fair, Berbera is a perfect Babel. In confusion as in languages, no chief is acknowledged, and the customs of bygone days are the laws of the place. So this, he calls it Babel. We know what Babel is. Babel is this story in the Old Testament where we are told that at some point humans used to speak one language, and then they built the Tower of Babel, and then God decided to make humans speak different languages. So he's saying at Berbera, it was a perfect Babel because there were so many people and they were speaking so many different languages. Of course, that goes to tell us that there were people from very many places who came to that trade fair. Disputes between the inland tribes daily arise and are settled by the spear and dagger. The combatants retiring to the beach at a short distance from the town in order that they may not disturb the trade. This is very interesting that the local people will often disagree or have conflicts, but what they did not do is to disturb the trade fair. If they needed to sort out things the way they knew how, then they will move out of the town a little bit and go sort out the issues, whether it's through fights or whatever means, and then they come back. And I found this to be very interesting, that these people understood the importance of this trade fair, that even when they had conflicts, they decided that we are not going to sort out our issues here. We are going to move out of the town and go deal with one another or each other out there, and then we come back. Long strings of camels are arriving and departing day and night, escorted generally by women alone, until at a distance from the town an occasional group of dusky and travel-worn children marks the arrival of the slave Kavila from Hurur and Ifat. So yeah, it seems like women used to be used to do some of the tasks. And I don't know whether the men will stay at the site and then the women will be the ones to do the transportation, something of sorts. At Berbera, the Gurage and Hurur slave merchants meet his correspondent from Busora, Baghdad, or Bunder Abbas, and the savage Gudabirsi, with his head tastefully ornamented with a scarlet sheepskin in lieu of a wig, is seen peacefully battering his ostrich feathers and gums with a smooth-spoken Banyan from Borebunder, who prudently living on a board of his ark and locking up his bugri, which will infallibly be knocked off the instant he was seen wearing it, exhibit but small portion of his wares at a time under miserable smart spread on the beach. So he's describing the scene that you will see this person from this nation having a conversation with this person of a different nation. They are haggling, trying to do business. And of course, he also tells us about, of course, the cultural sensitivity issues that will be around. Like he's talking about the Banyan wearing these bogri. For some reason, the people will not like that. That's what he's saying, that they will knock it off when he puts it on. But then he has this mat on the beach and he's trying to sell his own stuff and then buying stuff from the people. By end of March, the fair is nearly a close, and craft of all kinds, deeply laden and sailing generally in parties of threes and fours, commence their homeward journey. So by March, the fair is coming to an end, and the ships depart, often going in groups. The Suri boats are generally the last to leave, and by the last week in April, Berbera is again deserted, nothing being left to mark the site of a town lately containing 20,000 inhabitants, beyond bones of slaughtered camels and sheep, and the framework of a few huts which is carefully piled on the beach in readiness for the ensuing year. So he says by April, all people have moved out, and you look at the site and you can't imagine that 20,000 people were present. And that's a huge number. 20,000 people attending a trade fair. That's huge, actually. That's huge, especially considering that this is way beyond even 1850s. This is it's talking about early days, actually, not even 1850s. By 1850s, it's a permanent settlement, basically. Then he continues to say, beasts of prey now take the opportunity to approach the sea. Lions are commonly seen at the town well during the hot weather. And in April last year, but a week after the fair has ended, I observed 3 ostriches quietly walking on the beach. So now, past April, the site where the fair was happening, there's nothing, and then you'll see even wild animals now coming out. The lions, in particular, is mentioning. So yeah, so that is how Richard Burton describes, not actually him, but he seems to quote a document by someone else who was discussing or telling us how the trade fair used to happen in Berbera. And this trade fair made him come to the conclusion that Berbera was the Emporium, the great Emporium of East Africa. Like, this is where the most commerce happened every year. Those are my random thoughts.